I always thought I had grown used to being treated as an afterthought, that the cold silences and sharp remarks from my family had lost the power to sting me. But there are moments when one sentence, one look, can reopen wounds you thought had already scarred over. The night of my brother Travis's birthday was one of those moments, the kind that divides your life into before and after. Before I take you to that party, you need to understand the years that came before it. For as long as I can remember, I was the one who patched the cracks in my family's life. When the water heater burst in the middle of winter, I was the one who paid the repairman. When the electric bill piled up, I covered it. When my father called me in a panic last year, short on money, he couldn't admit to anyone else, I transferred him $2,200 and told him not to pay it back. Groceries, emergencies, birthday surprises, all the unglamorous responsibilities no one else wanted to handle. I shouldered them without complaint, not because I was rich, not because I didn't need the money myself, but because I thought that was what family did. You gave without keeping score, and maybe one day when you needed it, they would be there for you too. But over time, I began to notice the pattern. Every dollar I gave, every favor I performed, was quietly erased the moment I said no. Gratitude never lasted long, but resentment echoed endlessly. 2 months before the birthday, the breaking point arrived. Travis and his girlfriend had decided they wanted to buy a condo. They couldn't qualify for the mortgage on their own, so they came to me not to borrow money, but to co-sign. They wanted me to tie my credit, my future, to their gamble. I said no. It wasn't anger. It wasn't rejection. It was survival. But in their eyes, it was betrayal. They shouted. His girlfriend cried. My parents turned on me in unison. Suddenly, I wasn't the sibling who had covered their bills, the child who had bailed them out time and time again. I was selfish. I was cruel. I was the reason their dreams were out of reach. And from that night forward, we didn't speak. When my father texted me a short message, "Travis won't mind if you stop by for the birthday," I should have seen it for what it was. Not an invitation, not a welcome, just a grudging allowance. But something in me still clung to the fantasy of family. So I decided to go. Not empty-handed either. If I was going to show up, I wanted to bring something that proved I still cared. I spent days searching for the perfect gift. Travis had been obsessed with a sports team since childhood, plastering posters on his walls, memorizing stats, dreaming of meeting the players. Through a contact I hadn't spoken to in years, I managed to find an authenticated signed jersey from one of the team's legendary athletes. It wasn't cheap. I paid extra for rush shipping, made sure the certification papers were intact, and on the morning of the party, I wrapped it carefully in crisp paper, folding the edges into neat lines. I didn't include a card. I wanted the gift to speak for itself. Maybe I thought when Travis saw it, he would remember that beneath the arguments and resentment, I was still his brother. When I arrived, the house was alive with music and laughter. Golden light spilled through the windows, voices tumbled into the night air, and the smell of grilled food mixed with beer floated down the street. Inside, familiar faces I hadn't seen in years crowded the living room. They were smiling, drinking wrapped in the comfort of belonging. And there was Travis at the center, a beer in hand, laughter spilling out of him like nothing had ever gone wrong. For a second, I allowed myself to believe that maybe things could be okay. That maybe I would slip into the crowd, set down my gift, and we would ease into conversation. But then my mother saw me. She didn't greet me. She didn't smile or even feign surprise. Her voice cut through the music louder than it needed to be, sharp as a knife. "Oh, you weren't on the guest list. Must have been a mistake." The silence that followed stretched like an eternity. 3 seconds, maybe less, but heavy enough to bend the air. Heads turned. Some people gave awkward laughs. Others whispered. I saw Travis smirk the same smirk he wore when we were kids and he got away with something. It wasn't joy. It was triumph at my humiliation. I didn't argue. I didn't plead. I walked into the kitchen, set the box beside the birthday cake, and walked out the front door without a word. The night air hit me like a splash of cold water. I kept walking until I reached my car, my footsteps steady, my hands calm. I wasn't crying. I wasn't shaking. Inside, there was only a quiet certainty, the kind that arrives when you finally realize you've had enough. I sat in the driver's seat, staring at my phone. For 2 years, a file had sat untouched in my cloud folder. A video I hadn't asked for, sent to me by Travis's old roommate after one drunken night. I had ignored it, convinced it wasn't my place, convinced I would never stoop that low. But as I sat there, the echo of my mother's voice still ringing in my ears, I opened the folder. The video wasn't long, just 37 seconds. Grainy, poorly lit, but clear enough. Travis, half-dressed, making out with a woman who was not his wife. It wasn't ancient, wasn't innocent. It was betrayal caught in motion. I uploaded the file to a private link. No hashtags, no captions, no public broadcast. Just one recipient, Emily, his wife. I typed 2 words, "Happy birthday," and hit send. 10 minutes later, my phone lit up like fireworks. Call after call, message after message. Mom, Dad, Travis. Notifications buzzing until the phone grew hot in my hand. And finally, a text from my father. "Please delete it. We need to talk." I dropped the phone onto the passenger seat, turned the key, and drove. Past the glowing windows of houses, past the neighborhoods I had known all my life, onto dark roads where no one knew me. The calls kept coming until I powered the phone off and let the silence settle. What struck me most wasn't their anger. It was their panic. For years, they had counted on my silence, my compliance, my willingness to swallow humiliation whole. But tonight, they saw something they had never expected. I wasn't bluffing. I wasn't going to be the quiet one anymore. By the time I turned my phone back on the next morning, the storm had already broken. 17 missed calls glared up at me, 8 from Travis, 4 from Mom, 3 from Dad, and 2 from numbers I didn't recognize. Buried among them were Emily's messages. They weren't frantic like the others. They were quiet, measured. The first said, "We need to talk." Hours later, another came. I always wondered. He said I was paranoid. He made me feel crazy. Then after midnight, one final line I left. "I'm with my sisters." I sat in my apartment, staring at those words, the weight of them pressing into my chest. For 2 years, I had kept that video like a secret poison, never knowing if or when it would spill. Now, it had detonated, and the fallout was already spreading. Travis's marriage was cracked wide open, not because of me, but because of his own choices. I had only handed the truth to the person who most deserved it. My father's messages carried a different tone. Cold, clipped, commanding. "You're going to fix this." When I ignored him, he called. The moment I picked up, his voice was sharp with controlled rage, as though I had inconvenienced him, nothing more. "You're blowing up your own family over nothing," he snapped. "Take it down. She'll get over it. This doesn't need to go further." I stayed silent, listening to his voice twist reality into something absurd. Then came the line that sliced deeper than I expected. "You've always been the quiet one, the safe one. Now you want to act like some hero." He didn't wait for me to answer. The call ended with a dead click, and I sat there, phone heavy in my hand, wondering how many years I had wasted being exactly what he said, the quiet one, the safe one, the one they could always depend on to clean up the mess and never fight back. The days that followed blurred into noise. My mother sent a dramatic group text to the extended family. "Please pray for us during this difficult time." Cousins reached out in confusion, some sympathetic, some nosy. I ignored them all. Then one cousin Danny called and didn't give up until I answered. His voice was cautious, hesitant, carrying the weight of secondhand stories. Mom said you had a breakdown. That you twisted some old video to make Travis look bad. She said Emily left because you lied. I laughed, a short, bitter sound that surprised even me. Does that sound like Emily to you? I asked. Danny didn't answer. He didn't need to. We both knew Emily wasn't the type to walk away from a marriage unless she had proof carved into her bones. She had it now, but the rumors didn't stop with whispers. They began to seep into my own life like poison. At work, an anonymous call asked if our company did background checks on employees' internet behavior. Another call claimed I had sent inappropriate content to a married woman. HR pulled me into a small windowless conference room, the walls buzzing with the fluorescent hum. Their words were cautious, professional, but edged with danger. We received a complaint. Cyber harassment, digital manipulation, emotional harm. I sat straight calm and told them the truth. Someone from my personal life was trying to smear me. I explained what I could without dragging my entire family drama onto the table. My record, my reputation, the years of reliable work, all of it stood in my favor. HR believed me, but their warning was clear. Any further noise could be dangerous. That night, I sat in my apartment, staring at the glow of my computer screen, feeling the weight of every dollar, every sacrifice I had made for people who now wanted to ruin me. They weren't just trying to protect Travis. They were trying to burn me down to save him. And I realized something sharp and undeniable. If they were going to drag my name through the mud, I needed to drag the truth into the light. So I started building. I pulled bank statements, PayPal records, Venmo transfers, text messages, emails, voicemails. Every dime I had handed them over the years. Every emergency I had bailed them out of. I categorized it with the precision of a bookkeeper: utilities, rent, groceries, repairs, temporary loans that were never temporary gifts I had been guilted into giving. Line by line, I created a ledger of my life as their silent benefactor. When the folder was finished, I named it with 2 words: unpaid debts. Seeing it all laid out, undeniable and organized, brought me a strange kind of peace. For years, I had carried the weight alone, 1,000 stones in a bag no one acknowledged. Now the weight had form, proof, evidence. I didn't know yet what I would do with it. But I knew this: the next time they tried to twist the story, I wouldn't be standing there empty-handed. A week later, retaliation struck again. On a Friday evening, I walked out to my car and froze. Deep scratches slashed across the driver's side door, carving through the paint raw and ugly. Keys. Someone had keyed my car. My first thought was Travis, but I knew him well enough to realize he wouldn't do it himself. He'd send one of his loyal friends, the kind who mistook vandalism for honor. I filed a police report, attached screenshots of threats, texts, and timelines. I didn't expect an arrest. I just wanted a record, something official that said, "I see what you're doing." Hours later, my phone rang again. My father. "You're ruining this family," he hissed. "You're not getting another dollar from me." I almost laughed. He hadn't given me a cent since I was 17, yet here he was pretending as if I lived off his generosity. My reply came out calm, steady. Final. That's fine. Because starting now, you're not getting another dollar from me either. There was silence on the line, the kind that told me he didn't understand. So I explained. The car repair I paid for. The groceries when Mom was sick. The $200 last year, I told you not to repay. I remember all of it, and I won't forget again. That was the last time we spoke, but my resolve had crystallized. They thought I was bluffing, thought I'd crumble under pressure. Instead, I was building. They wanted me destroyed, but they had no idea how much I had kept, how much I had documented, how much power there was in proof, and I was ready to use it. Monday arrived with the weight of inevitability. I walked into the office already sensing that something was waiting for me, something heavy. By mid-morning, HR summoned me again. This time, there was no cautious curiosity, no polite small talk. A folder sat on the table between us, its presence alone enough to twist my stomach. "We received another complaint," the manager said, her tone clipped and professional. The words that followed sounded like they had been plucked straight from a legal manual: cyber harassment, personal misconduct, manipulation of private media with intent to cause harm. I didn't need to ask where it came from. The timing, the language, it was my family. This was their escalation, their attempt to strip me not only of my reputation, but of the career I had built independently of them. I explained myself, calmly outlined what I could, without dragging every sordid detail of my family history into the room. But the damage was done. HR had no choice but to put me on administrative leave pending review. I left the building with the cold sting of betrayal lodged deeper than ever. My family wasn't satisfied with whisper campaigns and threats anymore. They wanted to take the one part of my life they hadn't controlled, hadn't tainted. That night, as I sat in the dim glow of my apartment, I opened the folder I had been building. Line after line, transfer after transfer, every cent I had poured into them stared back at me. And for the first time, I knew exactly what I had to do. I drafted an email. It was cold, precise, professional. The subject line read, "Notice of financial action pending." Attached was a detailed, itemized record of every dollar they owed me. Utilities, repairs, groceries, loans, gifts disguised as obligations. Each transaction came with a date, a screenshot, proof undeniable. Then I blind copied my lawyer. 23 minutes later, my phone rang. My mother. She didn't even greet me. Her voice erupted into the line like a storm. "You wouldn't do this. You wouldn't sue your own father." I didn't respond. She filled the silence with accusations, shifting blame like she always did. "You're overreacting. You're tearing this family apart. You're selfish." I sat still, letting her words wash over me detached, as though I were listening to static. Then came the final blow. "Fine. Do what you have to do. Just know we're done." I ended the call without a word. Later that night, just as I was settling into the strange quiet of my decision, a knock rattled my apartment door. It was nearly 11 p.m. When I looked through the peephole, my heart stumbled. Emily. She stood there without a coat, despite the chill, her hands clutching a small black USB drive. She didn't ask to come in. She didn't offer an explanation. She simply pressed the drive into my palm and whispered, "I think you should hear what's on it." Then she turned and left, leaving me with the cold weight of secrets unspoken. It took me an hour before I found the courage to plug it into my laptop. Inside were several audio files dated across the last year. At first, they sounded like nothing but noise arguments, drunken conversations, fragments of daily life. Then one clip made my blood run cold. My mother's voice clear and unmistakable. "She's not family. She's a wallet with a face." Travis's laughter followed bitter and smug. "She says no once, and suddenly she thinks we owe her something." Then my father's voice, calm, deliberate, cruel, in its certainty. "Don't worry. Let her sulk. She'll come crawling back like always. She doesn't have anyone else." I replayed it once, twice, 3 times. Each repetition carved the truth deeper into my bones. Every doubt I had ever carried, every question about whether I was being too sensitive, too dramatic, too unforgiving, all of it shattered. Here was the raw truth stripped of pretense. To them, I wasn't a child, a sibling, a human being. I was a resource, a tool, a wallet. I sat in the dim light of my kitchen, the snow tapping softly against the window, and created a new folder on my desktop. I labeled it simply evidence for legal use. Friday morning, I carried that flash drive into my lawyer's office. My hands steady, my resolve unshakable. I laid everything out: the bank transfers, the text messages, the voicemails, the recordings. He leaned back in his chair, shaking his head slowly as he listened to the audio. "You have enough here to file a civil claim easily," he said. "You could sue them all." He paused, then asked the question I had already answered in my mind. "Do you want to?" Images flashed through my mind. Travis smirking at the party, my mother's sharp voice cutting through the music, my father's cold dismissal over the phone, Emily standing silent in my doorway, handing me the truth. "I'll start with my father," I said. "The $200 is enough to make it real." That evening, I sent the certified letter. Notice of legal intent. It would land in their mailbox Monday morning. I expected chaos calls, threats rage. Instead, what followed was silence. And somehow that silence was louder than all their words had ever been. But silence has weight. It stretches, sharpens, waits for the moment to snap. And I knew with a certainty that chilled me that when it broke, it would not be gentle. Sunday evening, the silence finally cracked. It didn't come from my parents, or even Travis himself, but from one of his closest friends, Jeremy. He had always been the hanger-on, the guy who lived for attention, filming everything for Instagram stories. Out of nowhere, a direct message appeared from him. No text, no explanation, just a link. I clicked it, half expecting nothing. Instead, a shaky screen recording opened, capturing Travis outside a bar. He was pacing in circles, clearly drunk, yelling into his phone. The audio was rough, blurred by the noise of the street, but fragments were clear enough to cut straight through. "She ruined my life. That coward sister of mine. I'll end her job. I swear to God." It wasn't about Emily anymore. It wasn't about the video. It was about control. Travis couldn't stand that the balance had shifted, that for once in his life, he wasn't the one dictating terms. His rage wasn't grief, it was fury at losing power. By Monday afternoon, my father broke the silence. His text was short, controlled. "You've made your point. Call it off." I didn't respond. Minutes later, he called, then again and again. When I didn't answer, another message buzzed through. "We'll go to court if that's what you want." I responded with a screenshot of the certified mail receipt. No words, just proof. That night, Travis tried one more tactic. A 30-second voice message, nothing but profanity and threats. At the very end, his words dropped into a cold hiss. "You think you've won? You think this is over?" The next week, I filed the official claim. Small claims court precise, documented indisputable. They were served within days. That was the last time I heard from any of them directly. No more calls, no more guilt trips, no more demands. Just silence. The court date came 5 months later. By then, the initial fury had cooled into something stranger: absence. I hadn't spoken to my parents in months. Travis had vanished from my life entirely. Walking into that courtroom felt surreal, as though I had been preparing for this confrontation my entire life. The judge listened. I presented my records, my documents, my receipts. My lawyer played one of the audio clips, my mother's voice echoing through the chamber. "She's not family. She's a wallet with a face." The room went so still you could hear the creak of chairs as people shifted uncomfortably. The ruling came swiftly, judgment in my favor. My father was ordered to repay the $200. He never did, of course. Not a single cent. But it didn't matter. The money was never the point. The point was that for the first time, there was a boundary. A line drawn in law, in ink, in fact. A declaration that I wasn't powerless, that my years of silent sacrifice had not been imagined. I left the courthouse lighter than I had felt in years. Emily filed for divorce 2 months later. She sent me a single email, short and steady. Thank you. If you hadn't sent that video, I'd still be trying to fix something that never wanted to be fixed. I replied once. You don't owe me anything. I'm glad you got out. That was the last time we spoke. My parents receded into their silence. No apologies, no excuses, not even the false reconciliation attempts they had used in the past. My mother quietly deleted me from her social media, as if erasing my name could erase decades. My father ignored every follow-up from my lawyer, choosing to act as though I had disappeared. And Travis? Well, I heard fragments from mutual acquaintances that he drank more, worked less, lost his job, lost his girlfriend, moved back into the basement like a teenager in exile. He still told anyone who would listen that I had ruined his life with an old video. He never admitted what he had done to cause it all. That was always his way, rewrite the story until he was the victim, until someone else carried the blame. Months later, I came home to find a plastic bag on my doorstep. Inside was the jersey I had left on the counter at the birthday party, the gift I had once believed would heal a rift. No note, no explanation, just the box returned like an unwanted relic. I stared at it for a long time, then laughed quietly. They couldn't keep it. It was too real, too heavy a reminder. But they couldn't destroy it either. They needed it gone, but not obliterated. So they dumped it on me, expecting I'd carry the weight again. I took it inside, slid it into a drawer, and closed it. It was the last thing I would ever give them. After that, life shifted. Slowly, quietly, it settled into something new. I moved to a smaller apartment in another city, changed my number, cut the cords that had once tied me so tightly. For the first time in years, I woke up without the dread of their calls, their needs, their accusations. The silence was no longer an absence. It was peace. But peace doesn't erase the past. It only makes space for you to see it clearly. And in that clarity, I realized how much of myself I had given away, how many pieces I had cut from my own life to build theirs, and how little they had ever seen me as more than the sum of those sacrifices. The hospital news came quietly sneaking into my inbox from a name I barely recognized. A volunteer from the community center where my father occasionally played at Respectability wrote, "I think you should know your father is in the hospital. Stroke. Stable now but serious." I read it twice, then shut the laptop. 3 days later, another email came, this time from a cousin I hadn't spoken to in years. "They're asking if you're coming. Your mom's at his side. They say he might not wake up." I didn't reply. Not out of cruelty, not out of anger. I simply didn't feel anything left to give. The story had already ended for me long ago. The book closed, the last page turned. A hospital bed didn't undo decades of silence, didn't erase the words I'd heard on that recording, didn't make me forget my mother calling me a wallet with a face. Then a week later, a letter arrived. A plain envelope, no return address. Inside was a check. No note, no explanation. Just numbers on paper, unsigned by meaning. I stared at it for a long time, laughed a laugh I didn't recognize, a hollow sound that echoed in my empty apartment. I didn't cash it. I slipped it into the same drawer where the jersey sat, two relics of a family that had once asked for everything and given nothing in return. For a while, I wondered who sent it. My father trying to tie up loose ends? My mother, guilt slipping through her fingers. A relative attempting to play peacemaker. In the end, it didn't matter. Because I had already learned the truth, closure doesn't come from the people who hurt you finally making it right. Closure comes when you stop waiting for them to. That realization washed over me in layers. I had spent so many years hoping for a moment of recognition, a thank you, an acknowledgement that I had carried them when they could not carry themselves. I had hoped for apologies that never came, gestures that never arrived. I had built my sense of worth on crumbs they refused to drop. And finally, after everything, I saw it clearly their silence was not my punishment. It was my release. Life in the new city unfolded slowly like a dawn you don't notice until the light fills the room. My apartment was smaller, but it was mine. No one called demanding favors. No one knocked at my door with bills in their hands. The peace was so unfamiliar at first that I mistook it for loneliness. But then I realized it wasn't loneliness at all. It was freedom. Every so often, updates about Travis trickled in through mutual friends I couldn't entirely escape. He was still drinking too much, still jobless, still blaming me for everything. He told people I had destroyed his marriage, never once admitting that his own actions had set the match to it. I didn't correct him. I didn't defend myself. Let him say whatever he wanted. The people who mattered knew the truth. Months passed. Seasons changed. One evening, as I was unpacking boxes I hadn't touched since the move, I found myself holding the jersey again. The paper had torn a little at the corners, the once pristine folds crumpled. For a moment, I almost threw it away, but then I put it back in the drawer, not out of sentimentality, but because it had become something else. A reminder. Not of Travis's betrayal, not of my mother's words, not of my father's silence, but of the moment I finally stopped playing the role they had written for me, because that's what it was in the end. For years, they had cast me as the quiet one, the safe one, the dependable one, who always paid and never complained. I lived that script so well, I almost forgot it wasn't mine. But the night of that birthday party, when my mother said I wasn't on the guest list, when the room turned to watch me walk away, that was the moment the script fell from my hands. I picked up a pen and began to write my own. It has been nearly a year now. My father may still be in that hospital bed. He may have recovered. He may not have. My mother may still be at his side waiting, stewing, blaming. I don't know. I don't ask. Because their story no longer overlaps with mine. What I do know is this: sometimes survival means walking away, even from the people you thought you could never leave. Sometimes it means choosing silence, not because you have nothing to say, but because you have already said everything, and they refused to hear it. And sometimes it means accepting that the family you were born into will never be the family you needed. I miss the idea of family more than I miss the people themselves. I miss the fantasy of unconditional love, of support, freely given, of belonging that wasn't earned with money. But I don't miss the reality. And that distinction has set me free. So, if you take anything from my story, let it be this: your worth is not measured by how much you give to people who only take. Your strength is not proven by how long you endure mistreatment. It is defined in the moment you finally stop. Cutting ties isn't always cruelty. Sometimes it's survival. I don't know what will happen with the check in the drawer or the jersey folded beside it. Maybe one day I'll throw them out. Maybe they'll gather dust until someone else finds them. But they are not weights anymore. They are just objects. The weight has lifted, and I am free. If this story touched you, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe. Leave a comment below with your own experiences, because telling the truth is how we take our power back.